Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Sarah Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Collins, and today we're talking about creativity, something that's not just about art, but about how kids learn, grow, and develop the skills that they need for life. My guest is Ryan Letterio, an artist, educator, and founder of several faith-based art initiatives, including Made Makers, an online art curriculum for families. Ryan shares how art shaped his own journey and now fuels his mission to support kids and parents. Together, we will explore how creativity helps to build executive functioning skills like persistence and flexibility and problem solving. We also dive into perfectionism, how it can hold kids back from even trying, and what it takes to create safe spaces where they feel free to experiment, make mistakes, and to keep on going. So let's jump in and rethink creativity, not as the outcome, but as the process that helps children to flourish. You guys, November is the month of gratitude, and I am really grateful that you are here listening to this podcast. It's also the perfect time to help your child grow at flexible thinking. At Homeschool OT, we've created a free gratitude and flexibility worksheet inspired by Smart But Scattered and our popular What to Do When Your Child Says, I Can't workshop. It's filled with simple, therapist-backed ways to turn I can't into I can't do it this way yet, while strengthening executive functioning skills at home. So celebrate gratitude this November using these resources. Both are found in the executive functioning part of my shop at homeschoolot.com and linked in the show notes here. So remember, a thankful heart makes for a flexible mind. And now, let's get started with the show. Thanks for being here. Hey, and welcome back to the OTs. And my name is Sarah Collins, and I'm your host. And today I have with me, Ryan Letterio, who is an artist, and I'm going to let him dive into more about what he does specifically for the homeschool community. But Ryan and I met this summer at a homeschool conference in Virginia and really chatted, and what he was saying, one, has influenced our homeschool because my son and myself, I am now taking fifth grade art. My son and I are doing this together every single week. But also, it really inspired me to think about how art affects our brains, affects our creativity, affects our ability to achieve and be successful in other occupations, or again, how we occupy our time. So I'm really excited to have Ryan here with us to share that across. Ryan, can you just give us a brief, synopsis of who you are and how you came about doing what you're doing now?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me on. It's an honor and a privilege. And yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation and super encouraged to hear that you're making stuff too. I think that's helpful in discipling our children into learning and risk taking and seeing how risk taking is necessary for growth. So I the kind of person who's been in arts my whole life. I really was the kid when I was 4 that said he wanted to be an artist. I didn't know what it meant, but I just know that I enjoyed doing it. And I think there was affirmation coming from my teachers and, just experiences I was having at home. I was kind of in a broken home. And so art was sort of a way to pass time, make sense of things, and feel momentum and even some kind of esteem at the time. And so that just stayed with me. Been a visual artist in a very focused way for the last 30 years. I have did my BA and my MA work and my MFA work at various institutions. Taught for 17 years at the #1 public art school in the country, VCU. So as a more of a Christian and a conservative artist, so it's kind of an odd environment for someone like me, but working with a lot of successful people and seeing a lot of things happen. Launched a nonprofit called Shako Art Space, which is an art gallery and podcast and all kinds of stuff that comes with that in 2011. And then co-founded the Maker Institute of Studio Art and Theology, which is an alternative to upper education learning, and then made Makers Christian Art and Design Education, which is a K through 12 online streaming platform curriculum that is thoroughly biblical, theological, and really trying to give people a thoroughgoing sense of why the art and design matter beyond maybe the way we think about it.
That's beautiful. I'm also a fellow VCU alumni. That's where I got my
You
master's
go.
degree in occupational therapy. I didn't realize that until we were
Wow,
just talking about this right
that's
now.
incredible.
So awesome. So one of the things that you just mentioned, was the difference in perspective of what art can do. So many people just think of art as kind of spontaneous, as free flowing, as just creative expression. But what you were talking about there is that you see it in a different light. So what exactly, or how do you see art?
Okay. Art is at least what we think that it is. Whatever you think that it is, it's at least that. But what I would say is it's far more than that. And I like to put art, design, and craft as much more together as a kind of a whole picture of what we're doing when we do it. And so what I would say is a couple things. Art and design and craft pervade everything. In other words, everything around you that is made by someone, it's drawn by someone, it's considered in terms of how it's designed, how it looks. So from the plate you eat off of, the typeface of the book you read, to page layout, to houses, to cars. So if you started to look around and you said, where is something that exists that isn't made, you'd be hard pressed to find it. But then
Right.
you'd have to ask yourself, well, what is entailed in the making of that? And so even down to the songs we listen to, the films we watch, the clothes we wear, it's pervasive. And so it's not ultimate, which is the mistake a lot of, I think, folks in certain belief systems purport, is that the arts are ultimate, kind of like in a godlike way. I don't think they're ultimate, but they do pervade and touch upon and interconnect with everything. They mediate our experiences. If you accept that as true, that provides the context for the unusual things that we think of as definitionally art. Those become more like a bouquet potentially on a table. The table
Yeah.
is a work of art as much as the bouquet of flowers is. And all of it's working together, I think, in a positive sense for the flourishing of humanity. So I would just say, and I'll stop here. The arts this is going to be a mind twister a little bit,
Yeah.
but the arts are the gathering up of that which is raw in order to fashion, shape, and refine into something that promotes life, that brings about flourishing. And so it's we gather up the raw utterance of sound to make words, we gather up the raw utterance of sound to play music or to make visual communication. And when that happens with the arts, it creates a suggestion rich, symbolified, objectified meaning. And so the arts are the suggestion rich symbolification of objectified meaning. And so to put it in really simple terms, you take a tree is suggestion rich, meaning a tree is suggestion rich. We call it tree, it's symbolified, and then it actually exists. It's
Okay.
objectified, it's there. And so the suggestion rich part is another way of saying it's aesthetic. So aesthetic suggests more than what's merely there. Otherwise, no one would have ever come around to playing with a tree, fallen or alive, and discovered paper or the ability to carve it down to build beams, to build houses. Think about how many things that tree suggests within what it is that are there, but only if we search it out, only if we mess with it, only if we unpack its potential. And so, how much of reality, or what I would call creation, is latent with potential? Dirt becomes pigment, dirt becomes clay, dirt becomes sculpture or houses or walls or brick. Think of how we gather up that which is raw and fashion it in order to do things like preserve life or flourish life.
Right. So, what you're saying here, which is fascinating to me, it's kind of how you can look at a big, something that's big, and then think of all of its little parts and think of how else it's going to be used, right? So that requires a bit of forward thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. So so it requires prior knowledge. If I could, so imagination. We often think of creativity and imagination as fringe, eccentric expressions and behaviors that individuate from a normalcy of behavior and activity in our local environments. And we privilege, and so we have people that say, I am not creative. Well, see, I would go the other way and say, that's just a particular kind of expression. It's not the definition. Imaginativity or imagination is the taking of that which is, that which you know or are coming to know, that which is in front of you, whether it's objectively in front of you or propositionally in front of you. So that which is with that which you know, in perceiving or trying to, in terms of foresight, perceive that which could be, might be, or will be in relationship to those things. So that which I know prior, that which I know in front of me, like I can be imaginative and take my cup and pour my coffee in. I'm taking that which I know, that which is, and I'm putting them together and I'm making a new thing. Now, this is a very obvious new thing that no longer strikes us as unusual. It's been normalized. But
Right.
there was a point when someone didn't do that. And so
Mhm.
then we see it and we test it and it works, or it promotes the flourishing, if you will. And if
Right.
it doesn't work, it dehumanizes and it promotes the unflourishing. And so there's a lot more to it. There's questions of wisdom, but we're always making imaginative choices. In the car moves this way, you don't have a lot of time. It becomes second nature to you to turn one way or the other. What's that based on? Well, it's based on prior knowledge that is now square within us, that's enabling us to be freed to make a fresh choice by instantaneous imagination of, I imagine I've got to go this way before I can actually go that way. And so, yeah, so there's so much to say about that. I mean, that's like, I'm saying a lot quickly, so there is an incredible amount of foresight, but also an incredible amount of play, a willingness to suspend your sense of self-worth and value and being judged for being inept or not inept. Like somebody had to play around in a serious way to discover that you could get paper.
Ah,
You, or it had to be a set of circumstances that demanded that. I think the world, or the way I would say it is, creation is bent or made for this purpose. And I think we are made makers. I think we're made to be this kind of being. But I think there's a lot of things that inhibit us from feeling the license and the freedom to go forward and make much because we perceive risk. We fear how we're going to be perceived doing it, which is why so many people don't make things.
yeah.
It's they might be perceived doing it.
Which is actually a really interesting thing. Like, how can we help our students to, so many times we're like, this is what we're going to do for art. We're going to draw this, or I want you to look at this like model and paint that or whatever. Between the process art, and the trying to come up with a product
Yeah.
for, I mean, me personally, it never looks like what I imagine it in my brain. And that's where I get stuck and don't want to persist anymore. And that's, it's my own personal issue, but that's an executive functioning skill, that persistence.
Yeah.
So, how can we help and support our kids with that?
Well, so I think one is not, I mean, when you think about, I mean, I was just thinking about executive functioning skills like, your flexibility, your time management, task initiation, emotional regulating of your emotions, working from memory, that prior knowledge that has to become embedded, you,
Mhm.
you resisting, impulse control, making kind of requires and invites the potential for all of those to be at play, including like monitoring yourself at some point, stewarding that which is in front of you, if you will. But time is necessary. And, so I think one of the things that I've tried to do is because I've seen this so often is that perfectionism inhibits.
Yes.
Perfectionism is definitionally not about the thing being perfected. It's about the protection and the proving of the one making the thing.
Yes.
And you're more focused on protecting and proving yourself. That's your actual desire. So I would often say with artists is they often want the benefits of being an artist without doing the work of being one.
Mhm.
They want the benefits of being a rock star without the actual ability to play music. We often want the outcomes, but not what it requires to steward the process well and uncover a learning that isn't just for the head, but it's for the heart, it's for the hands, it's for the whole being, the whole person. And the reciprocating of outcomes, like it's not a one-to-one. And so most things don't grow that way. And so in all of creation, everything grows very slowly. It takes its time according to its kind. And humans get boggled up in trying to be godlike and it starts young with kids because we as teachers and parents affirm perfection according to our comfort level with what we think something should be. So a lot of schools will narrow what creativity looks like to a kid who can copy a picture realistically.
Right.
And by fourth grade, those are the only kids that are reinforced as creative. And suddenly everybody else is not. And I mean, statistically, it's about fourth grade. I used to do this. I'd ask kindergartners, everybody's an artist. Second graders, everybody's an artist. Third graders, the majority are artists. Fourth graders, I'll never forget the first time I did this. Fourth grade, everyone pointed to the one
Oh,
kid
the artist.
that's
Oh,
been
that hurts my
anointed as the
heart.
artist. Yeah,
Yeah.
and he's sitting there and he's sitting there drawing. He doesn't raise his hand. He doesn't need to. Everybody else is pointing to him, and
Hmm.
he's making a picture that looks realistic. But if you look at creation, it's not just. I mean, it's astonishingly abstract
Hmm.
from our simple understandings of what we're perceiving or seeing, and so we've disconnected the meaning of making and allowed for what I would call like a secular idea of artistry, which has its roots in history as a very narrow endeavor. And so we have to recast a vision of why we're learning to make for our kids
Yeah.
and show them how it interrelates to all of the ways that we're making. And your knowledge is your wealth,
Yeah.
right? So the more you know, the more your wealth grows. But I think for me as a Christian, your knowledge, you keep it by giving it away. I think we're made in God's image, so we're Trinitarian. So knowledge flourishes as it's being poured out. So it stays with you as it's poured out. If you hoard it, if you protect and prove it, it withers. And so time is like money. We have to find the time. We've only got so much of it. And learning is growth. So we learn and we grow and we expand our wealth, which is to be given away. So if we had a vision for how we're to live in the world and what inhibits us, then we would know that making is for all of us because we're made to do that. And making specific things gives intrinsic knowledge and skill building that has import into various modalities, various human activities and behaviors that are for the benefit of each other and neighbor and
Hmm.
society and so on. And so the arts have an acute way of heightening discernment, decision making, impulse control, retention of knowledge, and regulating of your emotions because it can be
Yeah.
frustrating. And
Yeah.
so those are obvious imports. And something beautiful can result from that is not burdened with immediate expectations to function in the world.
Right.
I think we need categories. We need poetry. We need beauty. We need truth and goodness to be fostered in the whole of our children. If not, they become instrumentalized beings who think their value only comes from what they do, but not who they are. And so I think the arts have a way of demonstrating, impacting what you do while demonstrating something about the nature of what you are that can't be just boxed into a simple definition of value or no value. And so, I mean, there's so much to say about
Yeah.
protecting our kids and fostering, but we have to teach them to not be afraid. And that perfectionism is there's nothing that's perfect. Everything's in process. I mean, as a Christian, everything God is perfect. He's complete, no lack. Everything else is contingent and necessarily needs to grow by definition. It can only grow. It can't be completed because it's not infinite. And so, teaching our kids to be excited about the process. Like I've taught my kids and college students. I call it problem opportunities. Wherever the problem is your opportunity. So get excited about it. So I call them opportunities, jokingly. So I'm like, train your mind to be excited about the opportunity because that's where the new knowledge happens. That's where you grow. It's not so much in the reinforcing of what you know. It's taking that forward in anticipation of how you might grow. And then I would just add, it's also with an eye towards how what you're learning will be a blessing to other people. I don't think we focus enough on what we've been given to steward for the blessing of others. And I think a lot of times, like even for myself as a kid, I was hungry for a bigger picture for why I had to do almost anything. And I don't think we think kids can handle that. And I think that they can. And if we don't do it, we have a lot of adults that don't know why.
I
You know,
think the
we do.
underlying why is so important. And we actually, in our own homeschools, spend so much time of talking about the why. But we as parents are often, number one, we're just like, could we just get this done? Like
Yeah.
that happens quite frequently where we don't have, the time. We've been talking some
That's,
about time management here to explain this underlying why. Um,
mhm.
and sometimes it's because literally we don't know.
That's right. I
Maybe
think, yeah,
it's, I don't know.
yeah, we don't know. And we don't know. And we're uncomfortable with not
Yep.
knowing. Because,
That unknowing or not knowing is so uncomfortable for adults and I think for kids, which is where some of that perfectionism can show up.
and the problem with that is when we're uncomfortable with it, then it means we're less likely to come to know
Mhm.
because our first move is to protect ourselves, right? So you kind of box things in. And I'm always teaching my kids, like, I want you to know more than me, be better than me without pressure, but I just expect that you will because we're going to give you everything we got.
Yeah.
And so I don't lose authority with my children by letting them know that I don't know. I don't lose authority teaching at the Maker Institute or with Made Makers when I don't know something. I can model continually
Yeah.
what it looks like to grow knowledge
Mhm.
by being excited about what I still don't know. And with time, I think time is, there's not to be philosophical, but time is qualitative in some ways. So when you're having a good time, it goes fast.
Right.
Miserable, time goes slow. And so if we're really learning, sometimes we may have to sacrifice some of the quantitative aspects of learning because the qualitative fire is being stoked, and you're finding yourself where time is going quickly, and your child's actually really, really, really being marinated or warmed up in what they're learning. And I think the tension between the schedule and the curriculum, quantitative, and
Mhm.
the experience of learning, qualitative, we tend to err towards the side of check boxes. And we're afraid to let some of that go because they're actually really being rooted in a moment, a season, a week, a day, an hour, because it throws off our schedule. And that's hard.
It's really
We're
hard.
constantly
It's
learning
kind of
with it.
this concept, in OT speak, we talk about flow, and especially for kids when they're playing or when they are creating something, which play is often creating, right? They're creating their own worlds, they're just building things out. When they're in this like state of flow, which you're right, where time just doesn't seem to be of any importance whatsoever. And then contrast with that with us as adults where we're like, nope, we have to get this done and this done and this done. And we're often interrupting that flow. So this is going to be a tough question. Are you a proponent of if that flow, our kiddos are in this, they're really focused, they are doing something that they absolutely love. How do you feel personally about interrupting that?
Um, I think I think you have to have okay, so with my family, we have big goals for our kids each year. We sit
Mhm.
down, we have a going into the year, we talk about how they grew last year. We have they each get to sit down and they hear
We do this
our
too. We go out to lunch and
so
do it. Yeah.
so we commission them, and their commission, their particular things that we want them to see them grow and work on, the things that we're affirming that they've grown in or haven't,
Mhm.
is laid out. That is then also reinforced to the larger picture for me as a Christian that I believe we're called to. So my kids see that not narrowing down to themselves, but also extending out to their larger purpose.
Right.
Once that's established, that becomes the reference point. Where we're headed establishes wisdom regarding when you let someone stay deeper in the process, or when you say, we're going to have to learn to sacrifice and cut it off here. And it becomes a conversation about sacrifice. So you were really doing well, but the value of some of the other things that we're doing in the home or that work towards our larger goals take priority here. And that becomes discipleship and training because you're going to have to say no to good things at some point. So I'll give
Yes.
you a very concrete example. My daughter was working on some artwork to enter into the state fair for Virginia. and a big demanding painting, first of its kind for her, and then a small painting of some birds. And she's won blue ribbons like the last 3 years. And so we're back and forth on she doesn't have the time to make this flower, this bird painting. And I was like, I think bird drawing. I was like, I think she can. And my wife and I had to negotiate and have a conversation about foregoing some of what she was learning those last 3 days in school for
Mhm.
homeschool,
Mhm.
and then also allow her to stay up later. And
Yeah.
so it allowed her to stay up later because she needed hours to get into the right mind space to complete these well. And so praise the Lord, she won best of show for her age and a scholarship for the painting. And
Yeah.
she won for her third time in a row blue ribbon for this illustration. And so it's not about the winning, but it was about seeing the value of making those judgments. Now, of course, we're a week out from that, and she's back into her schedule, and we're like, you got to go back to sleep, and we can talk about that. Like that's a necessary thing because we know there's many times where you have to stay up late or compromise a few things, and then you pick back up with it and you assess the cost. And so my big idea is that we're always discerning this through how does it fit into the bigger picture of what they're called to? How does it relate to their year commissioning of things we want to see them grow in? And is it just noise, or is it the signal? Is it what we're really after, or is
Right.
this so when is it disobedience on the kids' part? When are they avoiding their other responsibilities? And so it's a deepening of knowing your kids and knowing what it looks like to discipline them well,
Mhm.
and know their weaknesses, so you can know when. And sometimes it's a hindrance; it's not actually a help. But sometimes, it's like my son retelling me something he was reading and doing it really well to where it's like I had stuff to do, and I was like, I'm gonna have to sit for this because this is unusual coming from him. Then
Yeah.
I'm gonna sacrifice, and I will pick up the pieces later. And then we just thank the Lord for how He covers our inabilities.
Our teachers. I love this. So there's so much that you're saying there. One is the piece of executive functioning called metacognition, right? So where we're understanding even our own brains and how well we're doing at something and how we're thinking. And then you're also bringing in, the time management and the prioritization and how all of these things fit together, not only with the art itself, but also with your time and like when you're going to do it, getting set up and making sure that you have everything. I love this so much. This November on the OT is In, we're highlighting CTC math because math isn't just about numbers, but also about building flexible thinking. As an occupational therapist, I see math as one of the best ways to strengthen executive functioning. Those brain based skills like planning, shifting, strategies, and staying regulated when things get tough. There might be one formula, that we use to solve a problem, but there are so many ways to approach it. Even with the environment, you can approach it on paper, on a whiteboard, printed worksheets, through mental math. That flexibility helps kids learn to adapt and to find out what works best for their brains. That's one reason that we've used CTC Math in our homeschool for 4 years. The lessons are clear, concise, and easy to pace. When my youngest flew through addition, we kept up his momentum and celebrated the progress. But when subtraction with borrowing got tricky, we slowed things down and even printed out extra worksheets. That simple change of format gave him new space to work, a fresh start, and a calmer environment to refocus. Sometimes that's exactly what kids need to regulate and to engage with learning. CTC Math gives families that freedom to shift pace, method, and environment so math becomes a tool for problem solving and not for frustration. So if you are looking for a program that supports how your child learns best, visit ctcmath.com. And if your teen could use help strengthening those same executive functioning skills across all subjects, check out our Executive Functioning for Teens course at homeschoolot.com. Welcome back. Ryan, we've talked so much about some of the philosophical things. So let's dive into a little bit more practicality, especially for parents who have heard things like, the about perfectionism, especially if they have a kiddo who does seem to be a perfectionist. So what are some practical ways, if our child is the one who's pointing at somebody else saying they're the artist, not me, that we can help to encourage that creativity, that even the process of art in our own homes.
Yeah, that's great. So, one way is looking. So, going back to, I won't go back to the definition, but when I talked about the broader definition, it gives you the freedom to identify. If we start with the assumption that our kids, that all humans by default are makers, that they're creative and imaginative, then we have the eyes to discern where it is that our child is doing that. And if you can find it and name it
Mhm.
and describe it a little bit, then you've given them an inroad into doing an art project over here. My daughter Ava is not one who overly, I think she's actually quite good visually, but for her it was connected to like baking. And so I could identify all the same conversation, the same language, the same processes in baking and connect them back to visual making. And then all of a sudden they're so much more closely connected that she has a prior knowledge that hasn't even been realized in art making, just predicated on baking for her. And so she can make the connection. I've talked with guys who work on, young kids who work on like engineering stuff, like, taking apart like a radio or something like that,
Mhm.
that seem to be very engineering minded or very analytically minded. And then we go, well, that's not creativity. It's like, well, no, you're deconstructing something highly creative. And you're really interested in the acute process and how it works. Problem solving is very much a part of creative making. And
Yeah.
so you can enhance your problem solving skills through making, even if the outcome isn't going to be on a wall in a museum somewhere. And so constantly looking for where, even in sports, you can find the same processes playing themselves out and identify in sports for a kid. And down to silly things like, when you get to the place where your kids can dress themselves, they're making aesthetic choices.
Yes.
The kid who doesn't want to be seen, who likes to suggest anonymity, so they wear darker clothes and they
Mhm.
kind of hide. That's not a neutral thing you're doing. You're making very makerly, conscientious choices. And not to make a kid feel bad, but just to help them identify like, hey, you can learn about why color creates volume or why color hides things or flattens things, or there's so many connections you can make that have real world import practically for us. It's overwhelming, actually. There's a reason why I launched an institution to teach this, because we're starving for lack of knowledge about these things, but the world is running on it.
Yeah.
And so we're just kind of intuitively running on it. And our children's affections are being arrested by things that they don't understand. And that's, I think, really important, especially in the homeschooling world.
I really appreciate how you're talking about the observations that you're making of your own student. There's so many times I talk about being a student of your student, trying to see what are your strengths, and also how you pointed out some weaker areas, how we're not afraid of being weak in some areas. In fact, that's what spurs our growth of knowledge and our growth of, what did you call it? The opportunities.
Robert,
I love it. So right now, what do you think would be a unique gift, of creativity in today's world? Because we have talked a lot about, what we look like right now today, especially for our kiddos who do struggle with that emotional regulation and attention. Like when they're struggling in here, how can creativity help?
so I think, okay, so one example, if I know we're probably short on time, I taught art at an elementary school, and there was a young man in there that had extreme behavior problems. It was a particular grade, it was third grade, and I'll never forget this because he was getting D's, his grades were low, and in art before that was typically taught as a craft, and you just kind of, it's a recipe, and you do it, and you go,
That's a project.
okay, so I start teaching real classes and he starts to gain an understanding. And as he's gaining an understanding, he's seeing cause effect relationships happen that are tending towards successful, and they're building in according with the way that he processes things. So within a semester, he went from being the problem kid to not the problem kid in the class.
Yeah.
And that became the place for him to understand himself as being successful that could be then driven into his other studies. So all of his grades rose.
Yeah.
So his performance from the beginning of working, me being his art teacher, it impacted all of his subjects, and the narrative changed around him because he found his entry point into learning. And it's because I was teaching art as a serious thing that is knowable and understandable, and not just a kind of disconnected self-expression where you're just self-expressing. It's like, no, 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 we're actually working with real phenomena that really does things, and it accorded with him. And the truth is, that was me. I was dyslexic and had a lot of issues as a kid. But the more that I learned to process the way that I do, I became very good at all my subjects.
Mhm.
That was my entry point into the house of knowledge, if you will.
Right, right.
And so, yeah, I think that would be the thing is I think the arts can encourage where we find ourselves discouraged, and they can give us a springboard into optimism.
Yeah.
They can give us reasons to persevere when it's hard, because heaven knows we need to do a better job of teaching our children the value of perseverance. We have a culture that is hollow-chested and does not persevere well. And so, what a gift to be able to teach them that.
I would even say, as far as persistence goes, like I have seen a big difference in my own son doing the art projects that we've been doing with you because we do them over several different weeks.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
there's so many times that we just want to finish something, like we start and we want to finish right away, or we
Yep.
want to stay, in that state of flow until we're done. And then the project's just over.
Yeah.
But instead, if there's something that we're, bringing through to fruition, not that it has to look a certain way, but that we can have this longer process that requires persistence.
Yes.
Now, that I know that we're building it there, but I
Mhm.
also recognize that I want to hold space for it. Like that can be very, very difficult for some kids to be like, what with that person? So when you were mentioning there, as far as pointing out the successes and especially if you're able to see your success here and know that it's part of a greater or bigger picture, like that can be some of the why. We're
Yes. Yes.
through this, we're working on your persistence. That carries over to so many different things.
Yeah, and it's intrinsic. So you start to know yourself that way. That becomes part of the self-monitoring. You are aware, like I was a track athlete and I was a high jumper, but I used to have to train long distance just by virtue, even in college. And so I remember having to run when there was nothing left to do, no energy left to give, and
Yeah.
I'm only aware of myself running. And the value of that has stayed with me in almost every endeavor that's tested me when it requires an endurance. And so that knowledge has carried over into other experiences. And so literally when you're talking about Made Makers, the program, that's one of the things that I prayed and hoped for is that so that you wouldn't be so impressed in the beginning stages with the outcomes to where you're trying to live up to like my ability or down to it, that there's enough focus and then open-endedness to be able to press into the process according to whatever stage or capacities the child has and whatever the context is for them and their family. It could be a little bit of time or more time. But one of the hopes and prayers was that you'd find people that are interested in the process and in the curiosity of seeing, well, where can this go? Because the curiosity, I think, is also a thing we need more of. And I think the arts can promote curiosity that extends beyond a very easy outcome, because then you're like, well, it's the process, and there's a value in the end for sure.
Yeah.
But there's also, I feel like if we're really getting it, so to speak, it should stoke curiosity for what else is there and what else can I do? What am I limiting myself from that I didn't think I could do just because of fear or whatever else? And now, well, I'm not where I was, I'm somewhere different. And I think that needs to continue
Mhm.
all the way into, Pastor said, you get your graduation diploma at your memorial. So you
Yeah, I would
basically,
agree.
I think that's true.
Yeah, well, such a beautiful thought to end with. Ryan, can you tell everyone how they can find you, find your work, find, access to this program for their children?
Yeah. So if you go to mademakers.com, so you'll find a lot of information about our program, and it's a subscription program. So you log on through the program or sign up through the website, and it'll bring you to download an app. And we'd love to have you join us. We're building this out, and we really think it's important. We think the world needs to understand this better. And the Maker Institute of Studio Art and Theology, we have seniors in high school that are now coming here instead of college to study, and entrepreneurship and business and design and art and theology. And then you can find me like on Instagram, Ryan Laterio, or any of those actually, honestly. So any one of those will lead to the others essentially.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time and for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate it. Bless you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of The OT is In. If you found today's conversation helpful, we would love it if you take a moment to leave a review. It really helps more families to find the show. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at homeschool_OT for more tips, behind the scenes peeks, and encouragement throughout your week. We'll be back next Thursday with more insights to support you and your unique learners. But until then, remember, there is not one right way to educate, and you are not alone, because the OT is always in.